Greetings and bienvenue, Midnight Crew. Thank you for returning to this broadcast, and welcome to new viewers joining us for the first time. If you like a video, then feel free to subscribe.
So something happened to a friend of mine last night. Me and 3 of my close friends get together on Saturdays to hang out and just chill on our mutual day off. Towards about 2:30, everyone gets their stuff to leave, and I walk them out to their cars. While we talk outside, one of them realizes he left something inside and heads back in. After about maybe 15 or 20 minutes, he comes back out, goes straight to his car, and begins to leave. I start to kind of jog after his car, so he pulls over and gets out. Looking like he was about to cry, he started saying, "Which one of you was it?" And I thought he was trying to pull a joke on me, but he seemed genuinely terrified. Although he was still pretty rattled, what he told me and my other friends was that he heard a door handle turn in footsteps and was going to try and scare us. Looking into one of my glass-paneled doors, he saw what he described as 2 reflections of himself, and the other one began to run towards him. He said after that happened, he sprinted to the front door and went to his car. Although he has no interest in knowing what it was, I am curious what this might have been. Are there any other incidents like this, or more information I could find? I wouldn't call this a mirror haunting of any kind, but I would like to get any information on similar cases or stories similar in detail.
I have to share this creepy and bizarre experience that happened in my life about 6 years ago. I used to tattoo and live out of the back of this house in Rosemead, California. During this time, I was going through a very confused and depressing state in my life. For some reason, I kept this back house shielded with blackout curtains to keep any light and sound out of fear of neighbors knowing I was running a business out of my residence. For some weird reason, I painted my bedroom 3 shades of gray on the walls and the ceiling was black. I used to hear many sounds of things moving outside in the kitchen and living room area. During the night, I could see this moving, misty shadow float across my bedroom wall, but I shrugged it off once I ruled out it wasn't a gas leak. One night I woke up in a very calm and relaxed state, but I found myself floating above the bed with my feet barely hovering off the mattress. I knew I wasn't dreaming because I was aware of all the items in my room and my eyes were scanning around. I found my body floating gently back down onto the bed, but was suddenly slammed down onto the mattress violently as if somebody put his hand across my face and pulled me down. It felt as if I was in that state of sleep paralysis. To my horror, as I looked to my side, I could not move my face or body, but with my eyes, I clearly saw the silhouette or the shadow figure of this creature. I saw the clearly defined, sharp-pointed nose, and as crazy as it sounds, the silhouette of this tentacle for an arm with all suction cups clearly defined. Its other arm held my head down to the bed and pulled it, as it was trying to make me look back at the ceiling, and in shock, every inch of my black ceiling was covered with this bizarre-looking hieroglyphic as if it were painted in wet substance. In my head, it was the color of blood, as it was hard to make out in the moonlight shining through my window. I felt as if the entity was trying to tell me something. With all my energy, I willed myself out of this paralyzed state, and once I blinked my eyes, it was over. No writings on my ceiling, no creature. Everything was gone. A few other weird things happened after this incident, especially at night and sometimes even during the day, but nothing that tops that crazy night I told you about. I'm not sure if there is a dark history in this residence or if I'm just haunted myself because I've seen things in every place I've lived. Friends didn't believe me, thinking I was under the influence of something, but I wasn't. I was completely sober. I know what I witnessed.
So last night, my girlfriend and I were in the forest around midnight. There was a full moon yesterday, in particular, the harvest moon. We were sitting by the bay in Hoover Reservoir. We were talking about our mortalities and how we could see ourselves dying. It was already a creepy night as is, but we saw something very unexpected. I had been looking around a lot, just to make sure we were really alone. I turned to my right one time and saw this black coyote dog-shaped figure slowly creeping up to us. We were in an open area by the bay, so we would have heard it or seen it had it come out of the forest. It crept up slowly. My girlfriend saw it and suggested we stand up. We were both confused. As if it was second nature, I pull out my phone and shine my flashlight at it, hoping to confuse it, but also to see what it was. Its eyes glared at us like huge discs. It must have been about 5 or 10 feet away from us. We both saw the figure disappear right then and there. I had my flashlight on, and it couldn't have run anywhere without us seeing it. We were both completely sober, and we both saw it vanish into thin air. We immediately got up and left, even though we had to trek through the forest to get back to my car. I am not making this story up. Does anybody know what it could have been, or what it could have signified? Pic related, that's a picture I found that mostly resembled the apparition last night.
I live in a small wooded area in a suburb of Lexington, Kentucky. In November 2023, I was taking my dog outside. My dog's legs were going out and she couldn't walk very well because she was old. So she's taking a while. I stand out there with her to make sure she's okay. She liked to go in the backyard to do her business. She's doing said business, and I hear footsteps in the woods. I assume it's a deer or something and just tell my dog to hurry up. The steps sounded like they were all over the place. Close then, far then, close again. Once they sounded really close, I got my dog inside. Since I'm an idiot, I went back outside to check it out. Again, I hear footsteps, and again, they're all over. Then it was suddenly really close and I saw a parting in the bushes and it was huge. I ran to my house as fast as I could, and I think I sprained my ankle while doing so, and didn't look back. The next day I'm taking my dog out again. This time I heard a sort of whispering from all around me in the woods. Once again I told my dog to hurry up and get inside. Maybe this part is unrelated, but 2 weeks ago, an old man in a bright orange jacket, a cane, and a hat was walking up and down my road back and forth for about 4 hours. It was like 20 degrees out that day. As soon as I pointed him out to my mom, he was gone, never to be seen again. My house has cameras, so I went back through the footage to see if I could find videos of him. You know what I found? Nothing. Absolutely nothing. Despite me seeing him on our cameras multiple times, I don't know what it is. I've just had a lot of strange encounters since the day I took my dog out, and it's freaking me out. To explain why seeing the guy was really weird, I don't really live in a neighborhood and I don't have any neighbors actually. There's my house, then the road, and a lot of people have died on my road, so it's not a place people walk on. There's no sidewalk or anything, just a road, then woods. So seeing some guy walking on it for hours was really strange, and not at all something I've seen while living there.
A couple months back, I was staying at a cheap hotel and had my first experience with a shadow person. I was walking down the hallway when I noticed a black cloud go down the stairs and into a room farther down the hallway. I later found out that the room it had gone in had been the site of a recent self-termination, and the hotel itself is known for having quite the reputation. I've often been quite skeptical of ghosts and other such oddities, but I can't deny what I saw and felt that night. I have since gone back to that hotel, and I'm always aware of the sensation of being watched, and have seen shadows outside my window at odd times in the night. Does anybody have any thoughts on what these clouds or shadow people may be? I've had a similar experience in the past about 10 years ago, where I've seen apparitions the same time as someone had committed self-termination. I was thinking maybe they were the manifestation of someone's psychic pain.
Now, what I saw is kind of hard to describe, so I will do my best. So, I was in my house in Modesto, California. It was late one night and I got up to get some water. I heard this weird noise and brushed it off as it might have been a car driving by. However, as time went on, I had this weird, unshakable urge to go outside with my flashlight. I'd say about 20 minutes at least I waited outside while looking at a magazine. I had nothing better to do, so I sat outside on the deck for maybe 10 more minutes. I heard this noise. I got scared and jumped. I didn't see it right away, but when I did, I almost soiled myself. I proceeded to shine my flashlight all around. What I saw was burnt orange in color. Its ribs were showing, but it also looked very bloated. It had nubs where its arms would be. It had long, skinny legs. Now the next part I will never get out of my head. What I thought to be teeth at first glance turned out to be several long, single strands of white hair sticking out from its mouth. Inside its mouth was a very pale purple color. No tongue, no teeth. Just looked hollow. Its mouth was big and wide. It had its mouth open the whole time. It also looked like it had no saliva. It did not make any noise. It had some kind of goiter on its neck. I forgot to add it had lighter speckles throughout its whole body, and on the back of its head was a big black patch with a few small white dots. Now, before you think anything, I don't drink, and I don't do drugs. I wasn't that tired when I saw this thing. I'm still confused to this day. I just stared at it for a few quick seconds as it approached me. I was too scared to move, and then it ran off when I got up from where I was sitting. Ironically, it ran so fast, like it was scared of me.
So when I was younger, I didn't believe in ghosts. I was always a big skeptic of anything I hadn't seen firsthand. But when I reflect on my childhood room, that it was haunted, it was the only room in my mom's house where I couldn't sleep alone in the dark. I would get an intense feeling of being watched. I had to have a TV or friend or something to get that to go away. I wasn't afraid of the dark. It was just an intense feeling, and I didn't believe in ghosts. But I just couldn't overcome that feeling. Every once in a while, this smell would manifest in my room. Never once in any other room of my mom's house. It smelled like something had died mixed with skunk and rotten eggs or something, just a fairly nasty funk. I'm not sure exactly when it started because it wasn't there when I first moved into the room. It would not be there. My room would smell fine. Then one day, say near my bay windows, it would appear and linger for maybe a few hours to a day. Then it would go away. Then maybe a few days or a week or so would go by, and then it would be by my closet. It would linger for a few hours to a day or so, and then go away. I would try to get my mother to smell it, but she couldn't really pick up on it. Until one time it permeated my room, and then she admitted something smelled off, but never was able to locate a source. It went on like that. It would appear in random places at random strengths, anywhere from very faint to very strong over the course of years. There were actually a couple times it nearly permeated my room. And those times the smell still never leaked out of my room, even though I have 2 doors with good ventilation. It got faint very quickly in the doorway and was gone by the time you had stepped into the adjacent room.
It was the 1st of April 2017. I remember the date because at first I thought it was April Fool's. I was on the 2nd floor of my house in Newbury, Berkshire, UK, and was getting ready to go to bed. I had just moved towards my curtains, which had been open until this point. I saw an odd light outside. I originally thought it had been a reflection because I had my bedroom light on, but I turned the light off and it was still there. My room looked out onto a building site of a nursing home. The light was slightly covered by the corner of the building site, which is when the light came round the corner. At first I thought it was a pixie or mythical character because I didn't recognize it. It looked rather small from the tall window I was looking through. The thing was looking around as if it had lost something, and I thought I was dreaming, so I knocked on the window, ever so quietly, yet it looked up at me. We stood looking at each other for many moments with these huge eyes. I then stepped back from the window to see if I walked back if it was still there. I must have stepped back from the window for about a minute to refresh my mindset. When I looked back outside, it wasn't there anymore. So relieved, I shut my curtains and turned back to my room, and it was on my bed. My bed was positioned in the middle of the room and my door was shut. I didn't see how it had gotten into my room, but it was standing on my bed. It didn't meet my hips in height, but had a very large head and skinny body. It was whilst I was staring at it that it pointed at me and then back to itself. That was when it came over to me, but it was walking weirdly as if it had injured itself. I was sitting down at this point as I was feeling faint. I don't know whether it was the being's doing or the fact I was seeing something that shouldn't have been real. It touched me over my heart. It was so cold I couldn't physically feel the being, but I could feel the energy, the coldness, and then it walked up the wall and through the open window, which had been closed before. I ran to the window to see 2 beings walking in the opposite direction than I had before, walking through the short hedge and disappearing just before crossing the road, completely disappear into thin air.
Pick unrelated, just a lovely scene I found in Tennessee. Hi X, I'm a lurker on multiple paranormal forums, but I've never actually been too knowledgeable on paranormal topics. I'm really just in it for the scare factor most of the time. However, I have had multiple experiences that I swear to be legitimately paranormal, and I want to know if there's a name for it, or if other people have experienced the same thing. I have experienced what I can only describe as omens of death or danger. No, this isn't some LARP thread. I am 17. When I was about 2, my father died of cancer. I can remember being a toddler and sitting on the floor at my dad's house, where he was confined to a hospital bed with late-stage cancer. I can remember sitting there and seeing pitch dark, shadowy blobs racing around the edges of the walls and furniture. A few months later, my father passed. I don't remember much else from my early childhood except for this. When I was about 7, this phenomenon occurred again. I was staying in a bedroom in the back of my house while my mom and older brother had a small party and gathering with friends. They wanted me to stay in that room because everyone was drinking, cursing, etc. The same shadowy figures began racing around the room. It disturbed me so much I came out near the end of the party when most everyone had left and told my mom to call everyone and tell them to drive home safely because I felt that someone was going to die that night. To recap, I have encountered dark, misty blobs that trace the perimeters of rooms and furniture since my early childhood. They leave me with intense feelings of dread and anxiety as if they are a warning. They usually precede disaster, injury, or death. What the hell is this?
Sup, guys. I know there's probably nothing to some of you, and schizo to the rest. But I just saw a ghost. First time since I was a child, and I don't even remember those accounts. I've just had it told to me by my dad. Hey, Ananita, when you were a child, you saw your brother after he passed. Stuff like that. And what's even more bizarre is that all day I've been feeling off, like lighter, I guess. My 1.5-year-old son was smiling and laughing towards something just over my husband's shoulder. I looked in that direction, and there he was, a man with a flannel shirt with his hands in his pockets, wearing a cap. Just standing there. I believe he is my dad's dad. My grandpa, who I never got to meet. He died when my dad was young. He even stood the same way my dad does. My husband, who sees spirits all the time, verified it. Yeah, that's your grandpa. Is it normal to feel panicked? Scared? Even knowing who it could be, I feel like I could possibly see more spirits, and that scares me. So, any advice? Stories? I need to think more lightly of this. Please cheer me up, X.
If family members are visiting to watch over you, that sounds lovely. Many people have a very limited ability to see spirits, even though spirits are everywhere. You are likely only seeing these spirits because they are so connected to you. If it does become a problem and you start seeing other spirits, try to not focus on them. The more attention you pay to spirits, the more likely you are to see them. It's a matter of training yourself not to look for them. My sister had the ability to see all manner of spirits, and it got to a point where she was really disturbed by it, so she had to teach herself not to be open to them anymore. Like learning to shut the third eye, so to speak. Personally, I wish I could see them. I figure they exist whether I can sense them or not, so why not know what is there? Anyhow, best of luck, and I wouldn't worry. Most spirits are harmless, and in your case they sound like a positive presence.
Yeah, that's how I've been before I saw my grandpa. I wanted to see spirits, but I didn't realize that it would be scary to see something that is usually invisible to me. I've been told that if you become too obsessed with it, like putting yourself out there like bait, calling out to these spirits like ghost hunters do, some of them can attach to you. My sister is like 20 years older than me. She sees spirits and can unknowingly remote view because she described our house and has never visited. She said once the spirits know you can see and hear them, some of the more desperate ones could latch onto you like a leech and collect your energy. They may even show you how they die. I want to be able to see spirits so I can protect my son from the bad ones. I know when he gets older he will see them more and try to reach out to them. I'm also a very curious person. But, well, we all know the saying about curiosity.
Hello, X. Now, paranormal stuff wouldn't normally be my first thought when it comes to explaining things in my life. But recently, a chain of events and recurring dreams and apparitions have come to haunt me. In mid-November last year, I began noticing that there were strange small gray apparitions that would seem to appear in a dark room for a couple seconds at a time. Always see them after my family has fallen asleep, and I leave my room to get a snack or go piss. They often take the shape of a human shadow or a house cat. I also began experiencing a horrifying recurring nightmare where I'm being eaten by a huge swarm of insects while my friends from when I was 5 or 6 watch silently. It's also always outside the house I haven't lived in since I was probably a year old or so. I only know it's that house because of old family photo books, but whenever I have the dream, it feels like an incredibly vivid memory. At the beginning of December, my family was also completely blindsided by sexual misconduct allegations. These were eventually ruled out as false by the police, and I never doubted his innocence, but of course something of that magnitude is very serious. Shortly after, my mom began receiving threats and harassment from a coworker who had told her boss that she wanted to cheat on her husband with him. Again, completely untrue, but a scary situation for her to be in anyway, since her job is pretty high up in her company. Am I just going insane? I haven't drank much or done any drugs recently, and my life has been pretty great and stress-free up until this point. These nightmares have been seriously disrupting my sleep schedule, since I always wake up around 3 in the morning after them, and these strange apparitions have made me honestly fearful to walk around my house late at night.
This is a story from my childhood that takes place when I was no older than 5. I know this because at this time one of my sisters and I were still sharing bedrooms. This room was the biggest one in the house. Earlier, the house was separated to 2 apartments, one on each floor, and this room formerly served as the top floor living room. To better separate my side of the room from my sister's side of the room, our mom had placed bookshelves across the room, dividing it in 2. My side was on the same side as the door, but to get to my sister's side, you would have to go around the shelves. One very bright and sunny summer day, my sister and I were cleaning. I wasn't yet old enough to be able to vacuum, so this was my sister's job. While she was still on her side of the room, I was sitting on the floor by my side, picking up books from the floor and placing them back on their spots on the shelves. The door was directly in front of me, and suddenly I spotted something in the doorway. It was a lady in white. I will do my best to try to describe her. Her hair was flowing in all directions as if she was underwater, and even though her face and head were very clear and solid looking, the rest of her was almost like a mist. Everything was moving softly, as if she was wearing a very loose dress and veils. In my childish mind, the only thing I could think of was a ghost. I got stiff with fear and ran up and hid behind the shelves in terror. I wanted to warn my sister, but I was too scared that the ghost would notice me if I made any noise, and the sound from the vacuum made it impossible for me to be heard. Whispering. My sister was just reaching my side of the room. As she moved over, I could see her cleaning the first feet of my side, before she also looked up and spotted the figure in the doorway. She froze for a split second before she jumped back and hid with me, leaving the vacuum running on the floor. The time seemed to stay still, and it was almost as if in slow motion that she moved past and disappeared from our line of sight. As this happened, we were really scared. But after the experience, we didn't feel like there was any danger to the meeting, and even hoped to see her again. We built ghost traps, or crawled inside white bed sheets pretending to see her in heaven. We naturally told our mother about this, but she laughed it off and dismissed it as our overactive imaginations. Years later, I told her this story again, and this time she admitted that she regularly feels a presence in this area of the house. She is not scared though, as she believes it to be her late grandmother that previously inhabited the top floor of the house.
Alright, X, it's story time. Be me. Only 10 years old. Brother, granddad, and family dog all passed on in the same year. Brother necked himself. Granddad drowned in a pool. Dog died, hit by a car. 2 months after bro's funeral. Mom and dad duck out for 20 minutes or so. Home alone. Now, being home alone, even for such a small period of time, is scary for a 10-year-old. Start hearing a kind of chatter coming from the back patio. Decide to go check it out. And I'm out there. Just my other dog staring blankly at the chairs and table. Nothing weird. Go sit back on the couch. Dog begins begging to come inside. Not allowed for a fairly big dog. As I peek my head around the corner of the back door, see 3 figures. One is a teenage boy around 16, another an old man, and the last is a dog. My still live dog is shaking at this point. Petrified, I just stood there. Figures turn around. Granddad, brother, and dog looking at me, smiling. Nope, out of there. Mom and dad get home, don't say anything. Not really scary, but still a little weird.
One evening around 11 p.m. in November of 2016, I was hard at work in my recording studio, located in the basement of my house in Huntsville, Alabama. I was working on a mix session of a recording I'd produced earlier in the month for a band from the area. I'd briefly gone upstairs to make myself a drink for a final listen to the tune I'd been working on. My wife was upstairs watching television, and I'd told her that I was almost finished with work for the day. I went back down to my control room, just off the soundproof music studio, to take a final listen before I made a final mix of the song, and then I decided to step outside to clear my head and get some fresh air. To get outside, I had to walk out of the studio, out a doorway, through my 2-car garage, and out another door which opened onto my side driveway. As I was coming out to the side driveway, I decided to glance at my iPhone, specifically my Facebook page, which I used for my studio business. Seeing there was no activity that I needed to respond to, I clicked the lock button and put the phone into my back pocket. My side driveway is roughly the width of 2 cars, and beyond the driveway is a side yard around 15 yards wide, with a couple of very tall pine trees. At the edge of the yard is a heavily wooded and rocky area which leads down into a city-owned drainage ditch. On the other side of the ditch is another heavily wooded and rocky area on a steep hill, and then another house which is mostly obscured by trees and heavy underbrush. That house sits on a different street which backs up to the cul-de-sac on which I live. It was chilly outside, but no wind blew. Typical fall night in northern Alabama for that time of year. It was approaching 11 p.m. on a weeknight, and the quiet neighborhood seemed even quieter than normal. I looked around the area directly across from me and saw that there were no lights on in the house across the ditch from me, 50 yards away. In fact, the only light visible in the whole area was a street light located in the back of our cul-de-sac, about 75 yards to my right. All of a sudden, things became very quiet. The crickets and bugs had stopped chirping, the night birds had gone silent, and the low-key noise of a suburban neighborhood had entirely ceased. Very strange, since usually one would hear a neighbor's air conditioning unit or a lone dog barking in the distance. Even the traffic sounds from a heavily traveled thoroughfare around 10 blocks away had gone silent. Immediately, the hair on my arms raised and I felt a chill. I scanned my heavily wooded backyard to my left and saw and heard nothing. When I looked back across my side yard, I couldn't believe what I was seeing. Hovering above a flat rock about 15 yards from me was a smoky white apparition with a white glow, around 12 feet in height, shaped like an enormous mummy. The apparition had the clear shape of a head, shoulders, arms, and legs, but no feet were visible. I could barely make out the shapes of trees through the apparition, so in a split second my rational mind attempted to make sense of the apparition by thinking it was simply a small patch of fog. But this fog was clearly in the shape of an enormous man, like an outline of what we'd commonly think of when we visualize a mummy. I literally wiped my eyes and looked again, and the apparition was still there, and I got the overwhelming feeling that I was being watched and observed. I had seen and heard things around my house and yard before in the 6 years I'd lived here, but nothing as distinct and intimidating as this. While watching the apparition, I reached into my back pocket and called my wife, who was still upstairs, and asked her to come out the front door and around to the side yard and to bring a flashlight we keep handy in our TV room, telling her I had seen something that I wanted her to see. So, thinking quickly, I thought to actually verbally address the apparition. I said out loud, "Hey, it's okay that you are here. We don't want to hurt you, nor do we want you to hurt us. We just want to know who you are." And with that, I switched on the flashlight function of my phone and slowly walked toward the apparition, which remained in the same spot as when I first saw it. I got within about 10 yards from the apparition, and I was able to get a better look at it. The thing was floating a couple feet above the flat rock below, and I saw no sources of light for the apparition. I looked left and right and saw no sources of light from either side, or anything from above it, or any stray light from neighboring houses. The thing just glowed dimly white. I took a couple more steps, saying to the entity, "It's okay that you are here. I don't want to harm you, and I don't want to be harmed." With my third step or so, I watched as the apparition began to descend slowly down into the rock it was perched above. It literally just folded itself down until it was completely gone. Just as it disappeared, my wife came around the corner of our house with the flashlight on, asking me what she was supposed to be looking for. I told her briefly what I'd seen, and I grabbed the flashlight and went over to the rock where I'd seen the apparition. Nothing remained, and the area was pitch dark. About that time, the noise from the crickets and bugs returned. A dog barked in the distance, and I began to hear noise from the main road several blocks from our house. It was as if something had flipped a switch, and suddenly the world of that neighborhood was audible again. I'd made a mental note while observing the apparition about its height and width, using nearby trees as a guide. The next morning I was still a bit shaken, so I took a construction-grade tape measure from my toolbox and made some rough measurements of the relative size of apparition. I came up with figures of around 12 feet tall and nearly 4 feet wide. On reflection, the apparition looked to be in perfect proportion to a large mummy, but made of milky white fog or smoke which seemed to move inside of the outer shape. I got the overwhelming feeling of being watched, but strangely, I felt nothing negative or antagonistic about the apparition. I just felt like it was watching me. Now I wished that I'd stayed still and not approached it, so that my wife would have also possibly been able to observe it. The land on which my house sits was undoubtedly Indian land at some point, as our land backs up to a low-lying city park that looks as if it had been a shallow lake in the last 200 years. To that end, I wonder if the apparition had been some sort of a spirit of one of the former residents of the land.
B tonight, barely 2 hours ago. Playing Sea of Thieves to kill some time. Decide to enter the pirate legend, which requires passing through a loading screen. Screen goes black for about 20 seconds. Pale, elderly figure with hollow, sunken eyes reflected in my monitor about 4 feet behind where I'm sitting. Kind of just swaying for the entire duration of loading screen. Instantaneous, petrifying chills. Don't want to turn around as I do not wish to confirm or cast direct gaze upon it. Keep playing as if I've seen nothing. Remain in Pirate Legend Hangout for about a half hour to avoid another loading screen. Eventually, the game crashes to the desktop and I leave my room with one hand obstructing my peripheral vision. Post the experience to X. It's bizarre, though, as this is the first time I've seen this thing in such a clear manifestation. I always have an uneasy feeling walking around the place late at night. Like I'm being watched, and I often hear what I swear sounds like muffled, labored breathing from no particular direction or source. We regularly poke fun at my youngest sister, as she claims to have. On many occasions, seen the clear face of an elderly man in her room out of the corners of her eyes, just lingering there, and once gazed directly upon it standing at the foot of her bed. It shook her to the extent that she refuses to turn her ceiling light off during the night, not even to sleep. I always chalk these feelings up to nerves, as I've always been skeptical of the paranormal, but this has really shaken me. Pick related, it's my pirate.
I hope that you enjoyed tonight's broadcast. If you enjoyed tonight's story, then please subscribe to the channel, as more green texts will appear daily. A new broadcast will appear when the clock strikes midnight Central Time.
Remember to check out the Odyssey page in the description for a second archive of the channel's videos.
There's also a Rumble archive as a backup.